Ex and boyfriend hurt my daughter, tarnish my friend's reputation, and I seek revenge. To start off, this is a throwaway as I don't want it to tie back to me. Also buckle up, this is going to be a long ride. These events took place over several years. I hope it is worth the read. I'm going to begin with the main players, me, my ex-wife Pepper, revenge target number 1, her boyfriend Steve, revenge target number 2, the boyfriend's ex-wife Mariah, co-partner in the revenge, my daughter Sarah, and my friend Jason, accomplice in the revenge. With that said, let's get some backstory out of the way. So, Pepper and I had a very up and down marriage. It was one of those that I was madly in love with her, but looking back I think she was in it more for the money and convenience. She had one son we will call Drug, because he was, and still is, a major drug addict before we got married, and I also had one son, name is unimportant, that I had full custody of. While married we had Sarah. I toughed the marriage out for as long as I could, but eventually, we just couldn't keep it together. We separated, and due to traveling some for work and having custody of my son, I moved back to my hometown a few states away so my parents could help, but kept an apartment in the town that Pepper and Sarah lived in so that I could still spend as much time with my daughter as I could. At this time, I asked my best friend Jason, who is a lawyer and owns his own firm, to do up a child support agreement for us. It is very important to note that we only addressed child support. It had nothing about custody or visitation or anything else in it. So, for about a year this was how it would work. I would spend a month with Sarah while my parents watched my other son, then I would spend a month with my son. Almost exactly a year later I could no longer afford keeping 2 households, and Pepper was wanting to move back to her hometown, which was in a different state, but closer to where I lived, so I gave up the apartment and she moved. The new situation continued for a couple more years. Pepper and I remained friendly and even tried to reconcile the relationship a couple of times, but it wouldn't work out. I was still deeply in love with her, but we couldn't come to an agreement on things like where to live and such. I forced myself to try and move on and started dating. She had been dating basically from the day after I moved out. Even though I still loved her, our relationship moved more into good friends than husband and wife. So, she finally meets Steve. I never was told much about Steve other than he was a certified ethical hacker, and that is what he did for employment. Important later, while they were dating, she would send me texts about their dates. She even texted me the day they first had sex together. This hurt deeply, and looking back I think this is what she wanted, but I tried to play the part of good friend and confidant. Steve and Pepper had been dating for 6 months when out of the blue she tells me they broke up, and she realized that she is madly in love with me. Since it's at the beginning of summer, she packs some suitcases and heads to my state. They were going to spend the summer with me and see if they like it or not. We had an amazing summer. All the kids are getting along. Drug even loved it here, so she makes it official we are back together and they are moving in. We went and registered my daughter for school. We even were able to get her on a PE cheerleading team for the summer. She made several friends and was loving being here. There was only one problem: Pepper still had an apartment that had all her furniture and stuff in it. I offered to go up with my truck and help load everything, but she insisted that her and Drug can get it done. So off they go to pack up and then head to their new home. As you can guess, things didn't go as planned. She was home for about 3 days when she informs me that under no circumstance will she move, and that her and Steve are in love and are moving in with each other. To say I was destroyed was an understatement. I couldn't understand why she had done it. The worst part was she left it to me to tell Sarah the bad news. When I told her, the devastated look on her face started turning my feelings of hurt into feelings of anger. Then Sarah broke down and started begging to stay with me and started spilling the beans. She told me things about how her mom would leave with Steve for days and leave Drug in charge. She had to learn how to cook for herself for date because Drug would spend the money on drugs and spend the whole time high. If Drug wasn't left in charge, Pepper would use her multiple convicted felonies to watch her. She also told me about the first time that she had met Steve. He came to their house, basically said hello and her mom disappeared into the bedroom and started having loud sex. Sarah was outside the door bawling, and they just ignored and continued. This is how my 8-year learned of 6, and she is still in counseling trying to recover 7 years later. At this point my anger has turned to rage. I immediately notified Pepper that there was no way Sarah was coming back, and I would fight her to the death to keep her out of that situation. Pepper responded by getting an emergency hearing in her state to force Sarah back. I had to scramble, but I managed to get a lawyer and easily won the hearing, which Pepper showed up late for and told the judge it was due to a disability. The judge agreed that, since there was no custody agreement, and with the troubling accusations that I had gathered, it was best for now for Sarah to stay with me. I had won the first battle, but it was short-lived. Within an hour of the hearing, I started getting tons of phishing emails and texts. I was also getting password resets and MFA codes from my bank, Facebook, Reddit, and any other accounts. I knew that Steve was behind it. The very next day Jason calls. His law firm's website, email, and phone account had been hacked. Because he had to disclose the hack to the court, and because he was working on a semi-high profile case at the time the FBI got involved. To say I was enraged was an understatement. These two people had destroyed me, harmed my daughter, and tarnished the reputation of my lifelong friend. It was time for them to pay and pay daily. I was a man on a mission. I spent hours digging up as much dirt as I could on Steven and Pepper. I had a lot of luck with Pepper. I found social media posts of her out late drinking that correlated to tardiness and missed days at school for Sarah. I found tons of pics of her and two strange kids doing fun activities. I found neighbors that were willing to testify that Sarah had to come beg for food because she was left with either drug or the felon. I knew I could bury her. Steve on the other hand had all his accounts locked down. I couldn't find any dirt, and it was driving me crazy. Then it hit me, try LinkedIn. It paid off. There wasn't much posted, but through his account I found Mariah, his ex-wife's account. I reached out to her, and she happily accepted. Mariah and I became fast friends. She hated Pepper, for good reason, as they had both abandoned her kids like my daughter, and didn't want her around her kids. I learned so much. To keep it short, Mariah and Steve had recently divorced. As part of the custody agreement, Steve got the house, car, bank account, savings, and a lower than usual child support. Mariah had traded all that money to have control of the kids. She knew he was a scumbag and all she was concerned about was keeping her kids safe. They had a very detailed custody agreement with rules for Steve to follow. As part of that agreement, if Steve broke any rules, then he had to pay and pay daily. He had to sell the house and give her half of everything. His child support would also double, and Steve would be financially ruined. Steve also didn't have her blocked on the social media and would regularly send texts bragging about how great his life was without her. Many of those texts had pictures of Pepper in them. We compared notes, we swapped evidence, we came up with a plan. And now it is time for revenge. First, I got with Jason. He let the FBI investigator know that I had also had some hacking attempts and we believed it was the same person. The investigator called quick. I gave him all the information I had and who I believed was doing it, and he asked a weird question. Do I know where Steve worked? Well, yes, I did, thanks to Mariah. So apparently Steve wasn't as good as a hacker as he thought himself to be. They had already traced back the hack on Jason to a business. The very same business Steve worked for. As soon as my conversation with the FBI was done, I called his work to lodge a complaint. I told the manager that someone was trying to hack me, and I was sure it was Steve. They of course did not take it too seriously, because I had no proof. What they didn't know was they were soon going to be getting a visit from a special agent. The next week was absolute hell for Steve and Pepper. Pepper got served with the divorce papers and her lawyer got served with all the evidence I had gathered. My lawyer said it was the most complete investigation he had ever seen. I had all 40 tardiness and 19 absences tied to nights out drinking with Steve. I had hard proof of them abandoning my daughter for days at a time. Mariah even gave me a picture that was taken at 2 AM the night before the emergency hearing with Steve and Pepper drinking in a tattoo parlor. The same hearing she was late to and said it was due to a disability. Steve got served that he had violated the entire custody agreement. Mariah had pictures from me proving he was with Pepper on nights the kids were with him and they were left alone. She also had proof that there was contact with Pepper that violated the custody agreement. The fallout was awesome to watch. Steve was fired. Between my complaint, another older complaint of him hacking, and the FBI showing up, they had no choice but to fire him. He did avoid any legal issues as the FBI could never tie it directly to him. The word spread of why he was fired, and no one would hire him in a job again. He had to sell the house, liquidate all the investments and bank accounts, and give half to Mariah. His child support got to stay the same, since he no longer had a source of income. Last I heard he was working at a grocery store. So in total his income went from $200k plus a year to less than $40k. As for Pepper, the divorce was swift and painful for her. The judge ruled in my favor for all counts. I got sole custody and sole decision making. She was forced to go to counseling, and her and drug can only visit Sarah with a third-party supervisor, paid for by Pepper. Sarah is doing much better. She still needs counseling, but she thrives in school and has many friends. She very rarely sees her mom, but she is much better off without her. And now let's move on to the comments to see what the Reddit community thought of OP's revenge. I don't even see this as revenge. I see this straight up as a damn good father protecting the shit out of his child the way he should be. You go, dad. This is the type of champions we need to be for our babies. Yes, this isn't about revenge point, this is him finding out what was actually going on with his daughter and taking swift, suitable and legal action to fix it. No way should Pepper and partner ever be allowed to look after kids. Hopefully, this will allow Sarah to have a chance to grow and live in safety. Also with this example, she knows exactly what drinking and drugs do to people. A damn good father and a heavy dose of karma. Great story, way to go. But man, I would be so afraid of mom coming to Sarah's school to kidnap her. Please be careful. She sounds like a loose cannon who has nothing to lose. Desperation on can lead to extreme decisions. Stay vigilant, sir. If the court orders have been given to the school, it is then up to them to make sure Sarah only leaves the grounds with the nominated people. I have had to ring for assistance when a parent who does not have any rights to see their child turned up at my classroom door. I did not open the door. They are permanently locked, and called for help, which arrived in the form of the very tall and imposing male assistant principal and half of the admin staff, all on phones to other agencies. Break times are harder, but as a teacher on yard duty, if I see an adult approach a student, or in an area of the school not directly between the car park and the front office, I have to approach, determine who they are and why they are there, and take appropriate action. Let's move on to the next story. They kicked my friend's mom out, so we trashed their store and got it shut down to yell doctor at the end of the post. Okay, I realize this may sound terrible, but you have to read through the whole story. This happened about 15 years ago when I was living overseas. Now I am in the US. Let's just say I used to live in a developing country back at the time. Me and my friend, let's call him Han, were driving around the city one night when he got a phone call from his older brother. Let's call him Barry. The phone call, from what I was able to comprehend, was pretty intense. After Han hung up, he was pretty frustrated. He told me to drive over to the supermarket near his parents' house. I did. I asked Han what was wrong. He said it looks like Barry has gotten into a fight and that he needs our help. I told them let's go see what's going on. On our way to that supermarket, Han called a couple of our friends and told them to meet us there for extra support. I know how this may sound. It sounds like we're a bunch of gangbangers looking to go start some shit. So before y'all start jumping into conclusions, let me give you some background. The community I used to live in is heavily tribal. It's not about ganging up, but more like standing up and being there for a friend in need. That's the common mindset and that's their way of life. It's pretty backwards at this day and age, and it's worth pointing out that I'm completely against that mindset now, especially that I'm living in the US. But anyway, we eventually arrived at that supermarket. It was in a very busy and vibrant area with lots of traffic. We parked our cars at the front door and stood out in the street waiting for Barry until he showed up. He was enraged, but yet calm and on point. We asked him what was going on, so he went on explaining. Apparently, Barry and Han's mom went into the supermarket to buy some chicken. She did manage to buy some chicken in a sealed container. She needed it to cook for the day, but when she got home and opened that container, the chicken smelled absolutely rotten and disgusting. Understandably, she decided to go back to the store and return that chicken, notify the store management, and get another chicken that isn't salmonella in a box. since she shops there quite often. I know my friend's mom. She's not a Karen in any way, and she's this super sweet lady in her 60s who is very friendly with everyone she meets. When she went into the store, found the store manager, told him about the rotten chicken, and asked him, politely, to give her a different one. She was even discreet about it and didn't want other customers to hear. The manager was super rude and refused to acknowledge that there's anything wrong with the chicken outright, refused to exchange the chicken, and wouldn't even smell or look at it. He called her a liar and told her to get the hell out of his store. Han, having learned that his mom was insulted that way, was pretty furious. Barry told us that he was going inside to talk to that manager and give him a piece of his mind, and that he wanted us to be there on standby in case things go down. We agreed and waited outside. Barry went in. We were looking at him through the glass door. We saw him speak to that manager with a clear understanding of how heated the conversation was getting. Basically, Barry asked the manager if he's the one who told his mom to get the hell out, and the manager says yes, and you get the fuck out too, and shoves him away. Now a little background on Barry. He was feared. He's always been kind of problematic since he was little. He was never a bully, but he just never took shit from anybody, ever. Now while I didn't agree with the way he handled things, I've always respected how he stands up for himself and for the people he cares about. It's worth mentioning that he's a lot more calm now. Within seconds of him going into the store, and after hearing how belligerent that manager was, Barry lost control over his rage, and we saw him start throwing punches at that manager. Other employees joined in on the fight too, and hell broke loose. Me, Han, and another friend of ours immediately jumped into the store. We started to trade punches with whoever was fighting. It was an utter clusterfuck. All I remember was that I punched the manager a few times, and then I was on the ground. I didn't get punched or anything, and still have no idea how I ended up on the ground. Luckily, no one got really injured from either side, but we had a clear advantage over them. The aftermath was horrific. Glass was broken, shelves were knocked down, and product stands were destroyed. I still remember M&Ms scattered all over the floor. It was a hot mess. At that time, we knew we were absolutely fucked. We pretty much vandalized a whole damn store and physically assaulted its staff. Eventually we left and stood in front of the store and started cussing them out. They stayed inside the store because they knew that the law would be on their side while they're on their property. So, about the laws in that country, they make absolutely no fucking sense whatsoever. A good example of its ridiculous laws is, if you get physically assaulted by someone, and you decide you want to press charges, and you do just that, you will need to go get a doctor's note stating your injury, and then head to a police station and press charges. The person who assaulted you will get a phone call from the police telling them to come to the police station. That person can also press charges the same way, even if they are not at all injured. If both parties have pressed charges, both parties will go to jail awaiting trial, unless bailed out. It's also worth mentioning that obtaining a forged doctor's note in that country is easier than buying a tub of sour cream. Fact. That said, we knew that we better hurry up and press charges. We got to the police station before the supermarket staff and filed a complaint against them. They eventually arrived like 15 minutes later to do the same thing. It was the asshole manager and another guy that was in the fight too. At the police station, it was a shock to me how nicely we were being treated by officers and how shitty they treated the supermarket staff. Like, what the fuck is going on? Shouldn't we be in handcuffs right now? What I didn't know was this: while we were standing out the door cussing those guys out after the fight, Barry disappeared. He did meet us at the police station, but we didn't know what he was doing after the fight was over. Well, it turns out that, while Barry was exiting the store after the fight, he started yelling my name as Barry, last name, and I'm not done fucking you up. Apparently, a passing by police patrol heard Barry yell at the top of his lungs and stopped to see what was going on. Out of sheer coincidence, one of the patrolling officers turned out to be a distant cousin of Barry. It's a small country, and he recognized his name while he was shouting it. He took Barry aside for a word and started asking him what was going on. Barry explained the entire story of how they insulted his mom after selling her bad chicken and refused to admit any wrongdoing. The officer also turned out to be an on-duty health and safety inspector. He then took it personal and assured Barry that he'll take care of it. Anyway, back to the police station. Now that both parties have pressed charges, the police were clearly favoring us. They threw the supermarket staff in a cell while we were sitting on the couch sipping coffee lol. Barry was still cussing the manager out. Eventually, we reached an agreement to drop all charges and we all went our way. Now, the real revenge. After the store was picked up and everything went back to normal, kinda, Barry's officer cousin went to the supermarket on an inspection the next day. Do you see where this is going? Yup, he found tons and tons of badly stored meat of all kinds that was completely inedible and could potentially be life-threatening. He also found spoiled dairy and a buttload of expired items. Apparently, the owner orders the staff to unplug the fridges and freezers at night to save on electricity. The owner was knowingly selling rotten meat to save a few bucks. The store was immediately shut down pending investigation. The health ministry got involved and fined the supermarket, and the fine was just so huge that store stayed shut down and never opened again because the owners weren't able to financially recover. TL. Doctor, my friend's mom bought rotten chicken. She went to the store to return it, and they kicked her out. Her sons and me went in and trashed the store, fought the staff, and got out of it. The store was shut down after a health inspection and hasn't been back to business ever since. Edit. Typus. Edit 2. Forgot to mention that the cops were favoring us at the station because Barry's cousin told them to go easy on us and they did. Rule of law is not that big of a deal there lol. Edit 3. I didn't mention the country because I'm trying to keep myself as anonymous as possible. All I can say is it's in the Middle East. Thank you for understanding and for the awards. What a wild ride. Now let's move on to the comments. Unplugging it and plugging it back in actually uses more electricity, though, because it's going to take that much longer for it to begin cooling. It's like turning off the air conditioning in an office for the weekend. You're not saving money because it's got to use more energy to cool down that large space before it evens out. Yup, cooling the air is easy. Cooling down all the stuff takes hours and hours. My bet is the food had barely been down to the correct temperature for a few hours at most before the machine was unplugged again. I gasped. That's fucking insane, right? My husband works in a grocery store here in the US. If a freezer breaks, or if the power goes out for more than 30 minutes, then everything in the freezers gets tossed because of health codes. If there is supposed to be any big storms coming and that could cause a power outage, and if the store has enough notice, they will actually bring in refrigerated/freezer trucks and move everything into those just to be on the safe side. I can't imagine any grocery style store just unplugging the food refrigeration units overnight. That's just crazy. One of the local markets has a huge generator that powers the whole store. During a really bad storm, multi-day outage, this store had trouble keeping things in stock. Word spread they were the only ones with power. Other supermarkets were throwing out their inventory. Whatever you did wrong, the fact remains that you saved the community from some serious shit. Those store owners could have killed someone with that rotten food. Honestly, at that point someone probably already got really sick or died, but it likely has been contributed to other causes. So all they did was save more lives and prevent any more deaths or disease outbreaks, given how long the store had been doing that. Without a doubt, right? Rancid meat can definitely kill very young, very old, or sick people. Holy shit, the store owner may have been straight up murdering people in his community to save some money of refrigeration. WTF. That's it for today. Thank you for joining us. What were your thoughts on today's stories? Be sure to leave them in the comments below. And be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps this channel grow.